Okay, hi guys. So welcome back to my AUD461 production, more specifically the work in progress for week 4. So what I have at the moment, I've added into my current session, is I have introduced the synthesized Pluck instruments that I have tried to emulate from the two reference tracks I've looked at since the week 2 proposal. So before I go through and explain, the new additions to my current project, I guess I'll play back how everything currently sounds. All right, so let's go through the new addition to the production. So I'll first just dive into the main instrument, which I've labeled here, excuse me, called the main plug in channel 8. And I just want to quickly dive into looking at the MIDI that I've actually programmed for the purpose of this given production. So the scale that I've used here is C minor. And you can see that in terms of the MIDI that I've actually recorded, so I actually drew in the MIDI by using my mouse and keyboard, because if you've read my week 2 proposal, I'm not musically trained in playing any instruments, and this is the common way that I normally compose or write music, usually by, exposing and using all the different tricks with MIDI programming, editing, and manipulation. But anyway, you can see the scale I've used is C minor, and a lot of the chords are basically written using lengths of quarter notes, right? So if you take a look at the notation here, the chords follow a really familiar pattern, and you can see it goes from the first chord being C, G, and then D to D sharp. Second chord is F, A sharp, and then D sharp. Third chord and the fourth chord is focused around G sharp, A sharp, and then D sharp, with some changes on the last two quarter notes, going from F, the highest note, and then back to D sharp. So one thing that's really important, I guess, with this particular genre of music, which is progressive trance, and that's the subgenre of music that Orasonic is known for, is the melodies and the chords especially need to have a strong sense of familiarity and emotive meaning as well. So the reason why I guess I've used a minor scale after looking at the scales that were used to create the two reference tracks I analyzed, which one of them being D minor, you'll sort of come to find that a lot of songs written by Orasonic and a lot of songs written in this genre are usually composed by using minor scales. So let's dive into the sound programming of this one single sound. And the synth that I used for the purpose of this particular element is Son of the One, and this is by a company called Lunar Digital. And the way I've set this up is I've used two oscillators, and I'll just quickly bypass the filter as well, so you can hear the original tone of the sound. It's just a really bright instrument, as you can hear. But the two oscillators I've used are set up a bit as being saw waves, right? And both of the waveforms are detuned from each other with their voices. And the most important part of the shaping of the sound is actually determined by the use of the filter. So I turn the filter back on, which I'm using is a high cut or a low pass filter. You can hear a considerable difference between without the filter and with the filter. So if I bring it to where my mouse is hovering around, you can see I've set up a filter envelope to actually manipulate the low pass or the high cut filter. And with this, if I just adjust the modulation amount progressively over time, I'll start with nothing, and then with it added in over time, So that was the original setting I used. I just backed it off to the value of 2. You can sort of hear the brightest part of the instrument is more so accented at the beginning of the attack. And that's the great control you have when you use a synthesizer and you go one step further and you set up what is called the filter envelope parameter. Overall, we can hear the sound of the instrument per every single new chord trigger. It's relatively, I guess, short in its playback. So I've used immediate attack, somewhat of a moderate decay. To sustain all this set to maximum, the sound is still going to be triggered as being rather short because the attack time is set really, really, really low. Another part of my analysis with this particular instrument, again, comes back to the pronunciation of the attack and the brightness of the timbre of the given sound. So a little thing I researched and also emulated was the use of a pitch envelope. So what I'll quickly do is exaggerate this parameter with the modulation amount of the pitch envelope and then back it off and then bring it back to its original value. So it's a rather subtle effect, and hopefully you could hear that it basically helped to further pronounce every single note trigger or chord trigger, mainly with the attack of the timbre, making it sound more brighter, more clearer from a listener's perspective. So although it's a minor part of the programming, all of these considerations help to achieve the overall result. So with this, I'm using EQ. It's an inbuilt EQ, more so just to boost the surrounding frequencies that are around 1000 Hertz or 1 kilohertz, and I've also taken out the bass that was existent at around 100 Hertz. But one thing I want to quickly highlight here is the use of delay as an effect. So if you listen to the effect of delay on the sound, you can hear the added notes that repeat in between all the individual MIDI notes I've drawn in into the editor here. But you can hear the delayed portion of the sound is actually moving in the stereo field between the left and right channels. And I've used a strategic time here. It's all synced to tempo, a stereo delay that's set up to delay the left and right parts of the sound indifferently. One which is set to the left side set to eighth notes, and the right side which has been set to quarter notes. And again, this is something that I picked up in my analysis of not only the 2 reference tracks but also other songs in this genre. Because I guess when it comes to trying to create a sound that has a sense of depth, I guess because this is the main driving instrument in the production, especially with the 2 specific tracks I referenced with Aurosonic, they need to sound as interesting as possible. So if I take out the delay, you can see the perceived sense of depth and space to the sound is drastically different. So I did use quite a considerable amount of feedback and also dry wet there. But if I bring this in with the reverb, and lower that setting, test it with the rest of the project and the instruments. You can also hear that the reverb is helping to add another sense of dimension to the instrument as well. So both of these effects I've sort of used together to create this added perceived depth of space to the sound. Alright, excuse me, my throat's playing off hay fever. If I take a look at the EQ is more so just getting rid of any unwanted low frequencies or bass. But most specifically is I've used another plugin here, and it's called Nicky Romero Kickstart. And it's a sidechain plugin, and basically the instrument itself is sidechaining by every single beat in the arrangement. So if I take that off, turn it on, play with the kick to give you more contrast. So just from a rhythmic or groove standpoint, I guess this is very typical also in the productions that I've analyzed by Aurosonic. And going back to the point in the previous week, in terms of my work in progress, I emphasized this point of clarity with the drums, which I heard in the two reference tracks. And without the side chaining, the clarity of the drums will be lost, as you could hear without the side chaining. But also another advantage, I guess, of this effect, side chaining the pluck instrument to the drums, is that added sense of groove and rhythm that you can hear with using this particular effect on the sound, which is basically side chaining. All right, so just real quickly, there's some other layers I've also used strategically here to help further enhance the result, because with progressive trance, and especially with the videos that I watched in week 2, in the studio videos of Aurosonic, I noticed they use a lot of layers when it comes to their key instrumentation. So I tried to follow a similar suit here, based on observing that as a part of their process, and I've layered an additional pluck and a piano sound. And they're not really obvious instruments when you listen to everything as a whole. But let me take them out and solo the original sound, and then I'll bring them back over time. So really subtle layers, and I guess the whole reason for that was just to try and give this instrument, or the main instrument, some additional layering and also a greater perceived amount of depth to the instruments as well. So with the pluck, the secondary pluck, it's a very short sound. I've used the triangle wave to actually generate the timbre of the given instrument. So something that's not as bright as the original one. If you contrast this with the saw wave, the triangle waves are typically less brighter in terms of the harmonic frequencies they generate. But I've used a similar technique of using a filter envelope to further shape the frequencies of the sounds. If I turn this off, back on, you can hear that the filter envelope plays a big part in shaping or sculpting the frequencies of the instrument. And then with the grand piano, it's just an Ableton preset. But one thing that's really noticeable here is it's dramatically EQ'd by using a high cut, so everything above 472 Hz is removed. Just because I didn't want all the mid-range and the high mids and high frequencies to actually clash with the original instrument layer. Okay, so that's currently my work in progress, and I'll check back with you soon in the next video. Thanks.